The summons arrived at Lucas Vance's door just after the midnight bells had finished tolling, carried by a hooded servant whose breath misted in the cold autumn air. Lucas had been bent over his workbench, squinting at a torn seam by candlelight, when the sharp knock startled him from his concentration. He opened the door to find a figure cloaked in deep purple velvet, face obscured, holding out a sealed letter bearing the crest of House Thornheart, a noble Orc family whose lands bordered the human settlements to the east. "You are the tailor Lucas Vance?" the servant asked, voice muffled. "I am," Lucas replied, wiping his calloused hands on his apron. His workshop smelled of wool and beeswax, modest but clean, tucked away in the smallest quarter of Millbrook Village where those who worked with their hands made their living. "Lady Karthira Thornheart requires your services immediately. You will come now." It was not a question. Lucas felt his stomach tighten. The Orcs rarely dealt with human tradespeople, preferring to keep to their own kind, and a midnight summons from nobility never meant anything simple. But work was work, and winter was coming. He needed every commission he could get. "Let me gather my tools," he said. 20 minutes later, Lucas found himself being led through the darkened streets toward the edge of town, where a carriage waited, black lacquered wood, with the Thornheart crest emblazoned on its side. The servant gestured for him to enter, and Lucas climbed inside, his leather satchel of needles, thread, and measuring tools clutched against his chest. The ride took nearly an hour, winding through countryside that grew increasingly wild. Lucas caught glimpses through the curtained windows of old-growth forest and craggy hills. Eventually, they turned down a long drive lined with ancient oaks, their gnarled branches reaching overhead like arthritic fingers. At the end stood Thornheart Manor, a sprawling stone estate that seemed to grow organically from the hillside itself. Lucas was escorted through a side entrance, down corridors lit by oil lamps that cast dancing shadows on tapestries depicting Orc warriors in battle. The servant finally stopped before a heavy oak door and knocked twice. "Enter," came a voice from within, rich and unmistakably feminine. The servant opened the door and gestured for Lucas to proceed alone. He stepped into what appeared to be a private sitting room. A fire crackled in an enormous hearth, and the walls were lined with books and curiosities, maps, weapons, strange artifacts he could not identify. Seated in a high-backed chair near the fire was Lady Karthira Thornheart herself. Lucas had seen Orcs before, of course. They came to market sometimes, or passed through on the roads. But he had never been in such close quarters with one, particularly not one of such obvious refinement and bearing. She was tall, perhaps 6 feet or more, with emerald-green skin that seemed to glow in the firelight. Her tusks were small and elegantly curved, protruding just slightly from her lower jaw. Her hair was long and black, braided intricately and woven with silver thread. She wore a gown of deep burgundy silk that must have cost more than Lucas earned in a year. But even in such finery, he could see the athletic strength in her shoulders and arms. What struck him most were her eyes, amber-colored and sharp as a hawk's, currently fixed on him with an intensity that made him want to look away. But he forced himself to meet her gaze and bow respectfully. "My lady, I am Lucas Vance. You sent for me." "I did." Her voice was controlled, but Lucas detected something underneath, tension perhaps, or worry. "You are a tailor, yes. You work with fabric, with thread, with mending what is torn." "Yes, my lady, for 15 years now. I apprenticed under Master Holloway before he passed, and I have kept his shop since." Lady Karthira stood, and Lucas was again struck by her imposing presence. She moved with the fluid grace of a warrior, despite the elaborate gown. She crossed to a side table where a decanter of amber liquid sat alongside crystal glasses. "Would you take a drink, Master Vance? This conversation may require it." Lucas hesitated. "If it pleases you, my lady." She poured 2 glasses and handed him one before returning to her chair and gesturing for him to sit opposite. Lucas perched on the edge of an upholstered chair that was likely worth more than his entire shop. "I did not summon you to mend clothing," Lady Karthira said abruptly. "I summoned you because I need someone with steady hands, discretion, and the ability to repair what is broken." She paused, then added more quietly, "and because you are human." Lucas felt a prickle of unease. "I do not understand, my lady." She took a long drink, then set her glass down with deliberate care. "What do you know of Orc culture, Master Vance?" "Very little, my lady. Only what anyone knows, that your people are warriors, that you value strength and honor." "And do you know what happens to those among us who are deemed weak?" Lucas shook his head. Lady Karthira's jaw tightened. "We have customs, old traditions. One such tradition is the rite of proving, performed when an orc comes of age. It is meant to test worthiness, to separate those fit for clan life from those who are not." Her voice grew bitter. "My younger brother Dravik underwent his rite 6 months ago. He failed. Failed how? He refused to kill." The words hung in the air between them. "The final test requires the killing of a captured enemy, sometimes a beast, sometimes a person. Dravik was given a human prisoner, a soldier taken during border skirmishes. He refused to strike the killing blow. He said it was murder, not honor." Lucas felt his blood run cold. "What happened to him?" "Our father, Lord Thornheart, was furious. My mother tried to intervene, but tradition is absolute in our clan. Dravik was cast out, declared clanless. No orc will speak his name. No orc will offer him shelter or aid." Her hands gripped the arms of her chair so tightly that Lucas heard the wood creak. "He is as good as dead. Worse, perhaps. To have no clan is to have no existence among orcs." "I am sorry, my lady, but I still do not understand what this has to do with me." Lady Karthira leaned forward, and in the firelight Lucas saw that her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I know where Dravik is. I have been sending him food and coin through intermediaries at great risk. If my father discovered this, I would share Dravik's fate. But sending supplies is not enough. He is alone, wounded not in body but in spirit. He has gone to live in the ruins of the old watchtower, 15 miles north of here, on the border of human and orc lands. I need someone to go to him. Someone who can offer help without the weight of orc tradition bearing down on them." "You want me to go to your brother?" "Yes. I need you to see if he is well. To deliver this." She reached into a pocket of her gown and withdrew a small leather pouch, which she handed to Lucas. It was heavy with coin. "And to tell him that I have not abandoned him, that I will never abandon him." Lucas stared at the pouch in his hands. "Why me specifically? Surely you have servants, retainers who could. No orc can risk being seen with him. The punishment would be severe. And I cannot go myself. My every movement is watched by my father's household. But a human tailor, who would question it if you were seen traveling north? You could say you were visiting the human villages on the border looking for business." She paused. "I chose you because I made inquiries. People in your village speak well of you. They say you are honest, kind, that you once sheltered a family of refugees from the northern territories when no one else would take them in." Lucas felt heat rise in his cheeks. "That was nothing. Common decency. Decency is never common, Master Vance. Especially not between our peoples." She stood again, and Lucas quickly rose as well. "I will pay you handsomely for this service, enough to keep your shop through the winter and beyond. All I ask is that you go to my brother, give him my message and this coin, and return to tell me how he fares." Lucas looked at the pouch in his hands. then at the Orc Noblewoman before him. Every instinct told him this was dangerous. If her father discovered her treachery, he could be implicated. And traveling alone to meet a cast-out orc, even one supposedly harmless, was not without risk. But something in Lady Karthira's eyes that desperate hope barely contained moved him. "I will do it," he said quietly. The relief that washed over her face was profound. "Thank you. You cannot know what this means. When should I leave? Tomorrow, if you can manage it." The tower is not difficult to find. Follow the north road until you see the old stone marker with 3 rings carved into it. Turn east and travel until you reach the ruins. They stand on a hill overlooking the valley. Lucas nodded. "I will need to make arrangements for my shop." "Of course." "Return home tonight. My servant will take you. When you have completed this task, come back here and tell me what you found. There will be further payment waiting." As Lucas made to leave, Lady Karthira reached out and touched his arm. Her hand was warm, strong, and surprisingly gentle. "Master Vance Lucas, please tell my brother that I love him, that what our father did was wrong, that he is not weak. Can you tell him that?" "I will tell him, my lady. You have my word." The journey back to Millbrook passed in a blur. By the time Lucas reached his small apartment above the shop, dawn was beginning to break. He slept for a few fitful hours, then woke and began making preparations. He told his neighbor, an elderly woman named Martha who sometimes minded the shop when he was away, that he would be traveling north for several days to meet with potential clients. She agreed to keep an eye on things, asking no questions. Lucas packed a rucksack with basic supplies: bread, cheese, a water skin, a bedroll, and a small knife he used for cutting thread but which might serve as protection in a pinch. He also packed extra needles and thread out of habit, and a small medical kit he kept for treating his own minor injuries: needle pricks, small cuts. He dressed in his sturdiest traveling clothes and boots. By mid-morning, he was on the north road. The day was clear and cold, the kind of autumn day when the sky seems impossibly blue, and the leaves burn gold and crimson in the trees. Lucas walked at a steady pace, his breath forming small clouds. The road was not heavily traveled this far north, and he encountered only a few merchants heading south with their wagons. It took him most of the day to reach the stone marker Lady Karthira had described. The 3 carved rings were ancient, worn almost smooth by wind and rain. Lucas turned east onto a narrower path that wound through increasingly dense forest. The trees here were old and thick, their roots breaking through the path in gnarled tangles that made walking treacherous. As the sun began its descent, Lucas saw the tower rising above the tree line ahead. It stood on a hill, as Lady Karthira had said, silhouetted against the orange sky. The structure was clearly ancient, built of massive gray stones fitted together with skill that had lasted centuries. Parts of it had crumbled away, the top was missing, leaving a ragged crown, but much remained intact. Lucas approached cautiously, suddenly aware that he was about to meet an orc who had been cast out by his own people, who might be half-starved or desperate. He called out when he was still 50 yards away. "Hello, I am Lucas Vance, a tailor from Millbrook Village. I bring a message from Lady Karthira Thornheart." Silence greeted him. He called again, louder this time. "I mean no harm. Your sister sent me." Movement at one of the tower's empty windows. A figure appeared, partially obscured by shadow. Then the heavy wooden door at the tower's base creaked open, and an orc stepped out. Dravik Thornheart was smaller than his sister, though still taller than Lucas by several inches. His green skin was paler than hers, with a sickly grayish cast, and he was painfully thin beneath his worn leather clothing. His tusks were small and well-formed, but his face was gaunt, eyes sunken. He held a crude spear in one hand, pointed at the ground but ready. "You say my sister sent you?" His voice was rough, unused to speaking. "Yes, Lady Karthira. She asked me to bring you this." Lucas held up the leather pouch, "and to tell you that she has not abandoned you, that she will never abandon you." Dravik stared at him for a long moment, then slowly lowered the spear. "You are human." "I am. Why would a human help me? Your people have no reason to love orcs. Your sister asked me to come, that is reason enough." Dravik's expression was unreadable. Finally, he stepped aside from the doorway. "Enter then, though I have little to offer you." The interior of the tower was surprisingly intact. Someone, presumably Dravik, had cleared debris from the ground floor and created a makeshift living space. A fire pit ringed with stones occupied the center, cold now. Bedding made from animal skins lay against one wall. There were signs of hunting: a bow and arrows, snares, dried meat hanging from hooks. But it was clearly a survival existence, nothing more. Lucas set down his pack and handed Dravik the pouch. The young orc opened it and stared at the coins inside, then abruptly sat down on the stone floor as if his legs had given out. "She should not risk this," he said quietly. "If father finds out, she knows the risk. She does it anyway." Lucas sat down across from him, keeping a respectful distance. "She wanted me to tell you that she loves you, that what your father did was wrong, that you are not weak." Dravik made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "I failed the rite. That is weakness by definition in our culture." "Is it weak to refuse to murder?" "It is weak to fail to do what must be done for the clan's survival." Dravik set the pouch aside and looked at Lucas directly. "You do not understand. Orcs are not like humans. We are warriors. We have been warriors for thousands of years because we had to be to survive. Strength, courage, the willingness to do violence when necessary, these are not optional virtues. They are necessities. But killing a defenseless prisoner is not necessary. It is cruelty. It is a test. To prove you will not hesitate when hesitation could mean your clan's destruction." Dravik ran a hand over his face, exhausted. "I do not expect you to understand. I am not sure I understand anymore. All I know is that when I stood there with the blade in my hand, looking at that human soldier bound and blindfolded and terrified, I could not do it. I tried to make myself. I told myself it was tradition, honor, duty, but my hand would not move." Lucas felt a wave of sympathy. "What did you do?" "I cut his bonds and told him to run. There was chaos. My father ordered the guards to kill the man before he escaped, and they did. Then my father turned to me and declared me clanless before the entire assembly." Dravik's voice was flat, emotionless. "I was given an hour to leave. Karthira found me before I left and pressed some coins into my hand. She was crying. I had never seen her cry before." They sat in silence for a while. Lucas found himself wondering what it must be like to be so completely severed from everything you knew, everyone you loved. To have your entire identity stripped away. "Why did you stay so close?" Lucas asked. "You could have gone farther, deeper into the wilderness or even to the human lands. Because despite everything, this is still my home. These hills, these forests." And because Dravik hesitated, then continued more quietly, "I hoped that perhaps in time my father might relent, that I might be allowed to return. Do you think that is possible?" "No." The word was heavy with resignation. "My father is old, traditional. He will not bend. And even if he died and Karthira became head of the clan, the elders would never accept my return. I am stained now, tainted." Lucas reached into his pack and pulled out the food he had brought. "Here. You look like you could use a proper meal." Dravik accepted the bread and cheese with a nod of thanks. They ate together in companionable silence. Lucas found himself studying the young orc, noting the intelligence in his eyes, the careful way he moved despite his obvious hunger. This was not a savage or a monster. This was just a person who had been punished for showing mercy. "You should stay the night," Dravik said eventually. "It will be full dark soon and the forest is dangerous. Wolves have returned to this region. I do not want to impose. You brought me news of my sister and enough coin to buy supplies that will keep me through winter. It is no imposition." Dravik stood and began building a fire. "Besides, I find I have been starved for conversation as much as food." So Lucas stayed. They talked late into the night, sharing stories. Lucas spoke of his life as a tailor, the satisfaction of creating something beautiful or restoring something broken. Dravik talked about his childhood, growing up in Thornheart Manor, his relationship with Karthira. She was older by 5 years and had always been their father's favorite, strong, skilled in combat, a natural leader. But she had also been kind to her younger brother, patient with his questions and doubts. She never quite fit either, Dravik admitted. Oh, she played the role expected of her well enough. But I saw how she would slip away to the library, how she read human books and wondered about their customs. Father would have been furious if he knew how curious she was about the world beyond our clan. "She seems very devoted to you," Lucas said. "We always understood each other. Both of us felt like we were acting parts, pretending to be what we were supposed to be rather than what we were." Dravik poked at the fire with a stick. "I wonder sometimes if she resents me now. If my failure has made her position more difficult." "I do not think she resents you. I think she fears for you." They fell silent again, watching the flames. Eventually, Lucas spread his bedroll and lay down, exhausted from the day's travel. He was surprised at how comfortable he felt, despite being alone in a ruin with an orc. Dravik had shown him nothing but courtesy and openness. Lucas woke in the early morning to find Dravik already up, checking his snares outside. The young orc returned with 2 rabbits, which he skinned and prepared with efficient skill. They roasted the meat over the fire for breakfast. "I should start back," Lucas said. "Your sister will be waiting for word." Dravik nodded, but Lucas saw reluctance in his face. Tell her I am well, that she should not worry and that she must be careful. Father's spies are everywhere." "I will tell her." Lucas shouldered his pack, then hesitated. "Would you like me to come again? I could bring more supplies, or just, well, if you are lonely out here." Dravik looked at him with surprise. "You would do that? Risk traveling here again?" "It is not so great a risk for me. And to be honest, I found our conversation last night more interesting than most I have had in years. People in Millbrook are good folk, but they rarely talk of anything beyond weather and crops." A small smile touched Dravik's face, the first Lucas had seen. "I would like that. Very much." They clasped hands. Lucas noticed that Dravik was careful not to grip too hard despite his strength, and then Lucas set off down the hill toward the forest path. The journey back to Millbrook took most of the day. Lucas arrived footsore and weary just as the sun was setting. He went directly to his shop, washed and changed, then sent word to Thornheart Manor that he had completed his errand and had information for Lady Karthira. The summons came within an hour. This time, Lucas traveled to the manor in full daylight, arriving as a legitimate tradesman might. He was shown to a different room, a formal parlor where Lady Karthira sat at her writing desk. She dismissed the servant who had escorted him and turned to Lucas with barely contained anxiety. "Well, you found him." "I did, my lady. He is alive and as well as can be expected." "I gave him your message and the coin." He was deeply moved. The tension drained from her shoulders. "Thank God, what condition is he in? Tell me everything." Lucas described the tower, Dravik's living arrangements, his physical state. Lady Karthira listened intently, occasionally asking questions. Her face grew troubled when Lucas mentioned how thin Dravik had become. He needs better food, more supplies. She stood and paced to the window. I will prepare another package for you to take. You will go again, yes. I offered to return, my lady. Your brother accepted. If you wish me to make regular visits, I am willing. She turned to him, and Lucas saw gratitude mixed with something else, perhaps surprise that a human would show such consideration for an orc. You are kind, Master Vance, kinder than you need to be. Your brother is good company. And he did nothing wrong. If anything, he did something right. He showed mercy. You think what he did was right? Her tone was curious rather than challenging. I think refusing to kill a helpless person is always right, tradition or not. Lady Karthira studied him for a long moment. You are an unusual man, Lucas Vance. She moved to her desk and withdrew another pouch larger than the first. This is for you, as I promised. And this, she handed him a sealed letter, is for Dravik. I have written everything I could not say through an intermediary. Lucas accepted both. I will deliver it safely, my lady. Karthira, she said suddenly. When we are alone like this, you may call me Karthira. We need not stand on formality when we are engaged in conspiracy together. Lucas felt his face warm. As you wish, my lady Karthira. She almost smiled at his awkwardness. Go home and rest. Visit my brother again in 3 days' time. I will have supplies prepared. Come to the servants' entrance at the south side of the manor after dark, and my personal maid will give them to you. So began a pattern that would continue through the autumn and into winter. Every few days, Lucas would make the journey north to the tower, carrying supplies from Karthira and his own small gifts, books, mostly, borrowed from the village elder who kept a modest library. Dravik proved to be an voracious reader, devouring everything from histories to poetry to philosophical treatises. The two men developed a genuine friendship. Dravik taught Lucas about orc culture, explaining customs and traditions that Lucas had never understood. In turn, Lucas shared stories of human society, the intricate social hierarchies of village life, the small dramas that made up everyday existence. They played chess with a set Lucas had brought, the pieces carved from wood by Dravik during his lonely hours. As the weather grew colder, Lucas worried about Dravik surviving the winter in the drafty tower. He brought extra blankets, warmer clothes, and supplies for improving the shelter. Together, they patched holes in the walls and rigged canvas to keep out the worst of the wind. During this time, Lucas also made regular reports to Karthira. These meetings grew longer as she asked more questions, not just about Dravik's welfare but about their conversations, what they discussed, how Dravik seemed in spirit. Lucas found himself looking forward to these meetings almost as much as his visits to the tower. Karthira was brilliant and well-educated, with strong opinions about everything from politics to agriculture. She was also, Lucas realized with some surprise, lonely. You have friends at the manor? He asked one evening as they sat in her private parlor. It was late autumn now, and outside the wind howled. Allies, acquaintances, fellow nobles, not friends, not truly. She stared into her wine glass. Orc nobility is complicated. Everything is about status, power, alliances. You cannot show weakness or uncertainty. You certainly cannot show doubt about our traditions. That sounds exhausting. It is. She looked at him directly. You and Dravik have become friends, have you not? True friends? Yes, I think so. I envy that. I love my brother, but I cannot risk traveling to see him. And I have no one else I can speak freely with. Everyone at the manor is either loyal to my father or looking for advantage. On impulse, Lucas said, you can speak freely with me if you wish. I am hardly in a position to use anything against you. Karthira seemed to consider this. Then she began to talk, really talk about her life. She spoke of the pressure of being the heir to House Thornheart, the expectations that she would marry strategically to strengthen the clan, the constant need to prove herself worthy. She talked about her doubts regarding their traditions, doubts she had never voiced to anyone. "Sometimes I think our culture is dying," she said quietly. "We cling so tightly to the old ways, but the world is changing. Humans grow stronger, more organized. Other orc clans are adapting, forming new alliances, changing their customs, but my father refuses to consider anything new. He would rather see us extinct than dishonored by change. What do you think should change? Everything. Nothing. I do not know," she laughed bitterly. "This right of proving that destroyed my brother, what purpose does it truly serve? We tell ourselves it weeds out the weak, but what if it is actually destroying the compassionate, the thoughtful, the ones who might lead us in new directions?" Lucas had no answer for that. But he listened, and sometimes that seemed to be enough. Winter came in earnest, blanketing the land in snow. Travel became more difficult, but Lucas continued his journeys to the tower. He invested in snowshoes and warmer clothing. Karthira began insisting he stay at the manor overnight after their meetings rather than risk traveling in darkness during the coldest months. She had a guest room prepared for him, and they would often talk late into the night before the fire. It was during one of these evenings, with snow falling steadily outside and the wind rattling the windows, that Karthira said something that would change everything. "Lucas, I need to confess something. When I first summoned you, I chose you because I thought a human would be safe, that you would have no stake in orc politics, no risk of betraying us. But that was not the only reason." Lucas looked up from the book he had been reading. "What do you mean? I had seen you before. In Millbrook at the market. You were helping an elderly woman carry her purchases to her cart. You did not hurry her, even though she was slow. You were patient and kind. And I thought," she paused, seeming to gather courage, "I thought that someone who showed such casual kindness to a stranger might show compassion to my brother. I remember that day. You were at the market. I was. I sometimes travel there in disguise, wanting to observe human society without the tension that comes when people know I am nobility. I wear common clothes and keep my face hooded. Most assume I am simply another orc." Lucas thought about this. "You wanted to understand humans." "Yes. Because I think our peoples do not have to be enemies. Because I believe there could be peace between us, if only we could see each other as something other than threats or monsters." Her voice grew passionate. "You have seen it yourself now. You know my brother. Is he a monster?" "No, of course not. Then why do our peoples treat each other as if we are? Why is it forbidden for orcs and humans to befriend one another, to trade freely, to live side by side? Fear, I suppose, prejudice born from old conflicts." "Yes, and it is stupid and wasteful." Karthira stood and moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered grounds. "You know what would happen if my father discovered I have been working with a human, not just employing you as a servant might be employed, but speaking with you as an equal, confiding in you? Nothing good, I imagine. He would be enraged. He already suspects me of being too sympathetic to humans if he knew the truth." She fell silent. Lucas joined her at the window. "Why are you telling me this now? Because I am tired of deception. Because in these months, you have become the closest thing I have to a true friend aside from Dravik. And because—" She turned to face him, and in the firelight her amber eyes were luminous. "Because I wanted you to know that this matters to me. Not just as a means of helping my brother, but as something valuable in itself. Our conversations, our friendship. It matters." Lucas felt his heart beating faster. He had been trying not to acknowledge the feelings that had been growing in him over these past months. Karthira was beautiful, yes, But it was more than that. She was intelligent, passionate, thoughtful. She challenged him, made him think about the world in new ways. And now, standing here in the quiet intimacy of the firelit room, he could no longer pretend he felt nothing. "It matters to me too," he said softly. Something shifted in the air between them. Karthira reached out and took his hand. Her palm was warm, her grip gentle despite her strength. "This is dangerous," she whispered, "for both of us, I know. If anyone found out, they will not. We will be careful." She smiled, sad and sweet. "When did I stop thinking of you as just the human Tailor? When did you become Lucas to me, not Master Vance? When did you become Karthira to me, not Lady Thornheart?" They stood like that for a long moment, hands clasped, something unspoken but understood passing between them. Then Karthira gently pulled away. "You should rest. You are traveling to see Dravik tomorrow, yes? Yes, I have more books for him, and you prepared those preserved foods. Give him my love. Tell him," she hesitated, "tell him that I am proud of him, that he was brave to follow his conscience." Lucas delivered the message the next day. Dravik listened with his head bowed, and when Lucas finished, the young orc was silent for a long time. "My sister is remarkable," he said finally. "She bears the weight of our father's expectations and our clan's future, yet she still finds the strength to think of me. I do not deserve such devotion." "You deserve it and more," Lucas said firmly. "Dravik, your sister is not the only one who thinks what you did was brave. You followed your own moral compass even when it cost you everything. That takes courage most people do not have." Dravik looked at him with something like wonder. "You truly believe that?" "I do." They spent the afternoon, as they often did, talking and playing chess. But as Lucas prepared to leave, Dravik stopped him with a question. "Lucas, do you have feelings for my sister?" Lucas felt his face go hot. "What makes you ask that, the way you speak of her?" "The light in your eyes when you deliver her messages. I am not blind, my friend." Dravik's expression was serious but not unkind. "And I think, though I could be wrong, that she feels similarly about you." Lucas sat back down heavily. "Even if that were true, what would it matter? Your people and mine do not mix. Such a thing would be impossible. Many impossible things have happened already. I am alive when I should be dead, fed and sheltered through the charity of a human I had never met. You have traveled through snow and cold to bring supplies to an outcast orc. My sister conspires against our father's wishes. The impossible seems rather commonplace lately. It is not the same." "Why not?" Dravik leaned forward. "Lucas, I see how this isolation weighs on Karthira through the messages she sends. She is trapped in a life she did not choose, bound by traditions she questions. If she has found someone who sees her for who she is, not just what she represents, that is precious. Do not dismiss it merely because it is unconventional. And if her father found out? If the clan turned against her as they did you? Then she would make her choice, as I made mine. But Lucas," Dravik's voice grew gentle, "do not make that choice for her. Do not decide what risks she is willing to take." Lucas thought about this conversation for the entire journey back to Millbrook. He thought about it through the night and the next day as he worked in his shop. And he was still thinking about it when he returned to Thornheart Manor 3 days later. Karthira met him in her parlor as usual. But this time, after the door was closed and they were alone, Lucas said what he had been holding back. "Karthira, I need to tell you something. And if it is unwelcome, I apologize in advance, but I cannot continue without saying it." She looked at him with those amber eyes, waiting. "These past months they have changed me. You have changed me. I find myself thinking of you constantly. When I read something interesting, I want to share it with you. When I see something beautiful, I wish you could see it too. And when I am with you, I feel more alive than I have in years." He took a breath. I am in love with you. I know it is impossible, foolish, dangerous, but it is the truth and you deserve to know it. Karthira stood very still. Then she crossed the space between them in 2 long strides and kissed him. Her lips were warm and soft, her tusks smooth against his face. Lucas wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, feeling the strong, lean muscle of her body against his. The kiss deepened, became urgent, all the months of unspoken desire suddenly given voice. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Karthira rested her forehead against his. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have for weeks, maybe months." I tried to deny it, to convince myself it was just friendship or gratitude. But Lucas, every time you walk away, I want to call you back. Every moment we are apart, I count the hours until I can see you again. "What do we do?" Lucas asked. "I do not know." "Nothing like this has ever." She pulled back to look at him. "You understand what this would mean if it became known. You could be driven from your village. Worse, you could be killed. Humans would see you as a traitor to your kind. And you could lose everything. Your position, your family, perhaps your life." "Yes." She touched his face gently. "Perhaps we are both fools. Then let us be fools together." They talked late into the night, trying to find some path forward. The situation seemed impossible. Karthira could not leave her position without arousing suspicion. Lucas could not openly court an Orc noblewoman, and yet neither wanted to end what had begun between them. "We could run away," Lucas suggested at one point. "You, me, and Dravik. Find somewhere distant where our peoples do not care about such things. There is nowhere far enough, and I cannot abandon my responsibilities entirely. I have people depending on me, tenants and servants who would suffer under my father's sole rule." Karthira shook her head. "But perhaps there is another way, a slower way." "What do you mean?" "My father is old. In a few years, perhaps 5, he will likely step down and I will become head of House Thornheart. When that happens, I will have authority to change some of our customs. Not all at once the elders would rebel, but gradually. I could begin building bridges with human communities, establishing trade, normalizing contact between our peoples. And in 5 years, we wait. We continue as we have been. I send supplies to Dravik through you. We meet here privately. We steal what happiness we can." Her voice broke slightly. "It is not enough, I know, but it is something." Lucas pulled her close again. "Then we will wait. I would wait 10 years for you if necessary." So they settled into a new routine, this one flavored with secret romance. Lucas continued his regular visits to both Dravik and Karthira. The young orc noticed the change immediately. "She told you how she feels," he said the next time Lucas visited the tower. "How did you know?" Dravik grinned, his tusks catching the firelight. "You are practically glowing, my friend." "It suits you. We cannot be together openly, perhaps not for years. But you are together. That is what matters." Dravik clapped Lucas on the shoulder. "I am happy for you both. You deserve joy, and my sister deserves someone who sees her as more than a political asset." Winter deepened. The supplies Lucas brought kept Dravik comfortable, and Lucas himself found that the long walks to the tower gave him time to think, to process everything that was happening. His shop continued to thrive, word had spread of his skill, and he received commissions from villages beyond Millbrook. One evening in deep winter, as Lucas sat with Karthira in her parlor, she said something that made his blood run cold. "My father is arranging a marriage for me." Lucas felt his stomach drop. "What?" "Lord Cragger of the Northern Hills. He is powerful, wealthy, and his clan has strong military traditions. Father sees it as an ideal alliance." Her voice was tight with controlled anger. "I am to meet Cragger next month. The formal betrothal would follow soon after. You cannot. I have no choice, not openly. If I refuse outright, My father will know something is wrong. He will investigate and everything will unravel. She gripped Lucas's hand tightly. But I have no intention of marrying Cragger. I need time to think to find a way out of this. What if you told your father the truth? That you oppose this tradition, that you want to choose your own path? He would never listen. Lucas, you must understand, in Orc society, marriages among nobility are never about personal choice. They are about clan survival, about alliances and power. Romance is seen as a weakness. Lucas felt helpless rage building in his chest. There has to be something we can do. They discussed options late into the night but found no clear solution. Karthira needed to stall without arousing suspicion. Lucas needed to stay away from the manor while Lord Cragger was visiting, to avoid any risk of discovery. The next month was agony. Lucas continued visiting Dravik, but his meetings with Karthira became less frequent and more carefully managed. She sent word through her maid about what was happening with the courtship. Lord Cragger was apparently everything her father wanted: strong, traditional, ambitious. He was also, according to Karthira's terse notes, arrogant and dismissive of her opinions. The betrothal was moving forward rapidly. Lucas felt desperate. He confided in Dravik, who listened gravely. "There is only one solution I can see," the young orc said finally. "Karthira must leave. Abandon her position, her title, everything. Come here or go somewhere else entirely, begin a new life. She will not abandon her people. She feels responsible for them. Then she must accept the marriage, or—" Dravik paused, thinking. "Or she must find a way to make herself unacceptable as a bride." "What do you mean? If she were to be compromised somehow, discovered doing something that would shame the family?" "Lord Cragger would withdraw his suit rather than be associated with scandal. But that would destroy her reputation. Her father might disown her as he did you. Yes, it would be a terrible risk." Dravik met Lucas's eyes, "but it would be her choice. And if my sister has to sacrifice either her happiness or her honor, I know which she would choose." Lucas returned to Millbrook in turmoil. The situation seemed impossible no matter how he looked at it. But 3 days later, a message arrived from Karthira asking him to come to the manor urgently. He found her in her parlor, and he immediately saw that something had changed. There was a hardness in her expression, a determination that both excited and frightened him. "I have made a decision," she said without preamble. "I am going to refuse the marriage, publicly, definitively. I will tell my father that I will not marry Lord Cragger or anyone else he chooses, that I claim the right to choose my own path. He will disown you. Probably. Almost certainly, in fact." She smiled, but there was pain in it. "I will become like Dravik, clanless, without position or protection. But I will be free, and I will be able to choose my own life." Lucas felt torn between hope and fear. "Are you sure? Karthira, you would lose everything." "Not everything. I would lose my title, my inheritance, my place in Orc society, but I would keep my integrity, my self-respect." And she took his hands. "I would have the chance to build a life with you if you still want that." "Of course I want that, but I cannot ask you to give up so much." "You are not asking. I am choosing." Her voice was firm. "Lucas, I have spent my entire life doing what was expected of me. Being the perfect heir, the obedient daughter. I am tired of it. My brother was brave enough to follow his conscience even when it cost him everything. Can I do less?" They held each other for a long time. Finally, Lucas said, "What will you do after your father disowns you? Come to Millbrook. Live quietly, perhaps take up some trade. Learn what it means to be simply Karthira, not Lady Thornheart." She looked at him. "Would your village accept me?" "I will not lie, it will be difficult. People are suspicious of orcs, but they know me, trust me. If I vouch for you, if we are patient and you prove yourself through your actions, I think eventually they will accept you." Then that is what I will do. I will speak to my father tomorrow. After that, she shrugged, we shall see what happens. Lucas wanted to stay, to be there when she confronted her father, but Karthira insisted he leave before dawn. It would not do for him to be present during what was certain to be a dramatic confrontation. He returned to Millbrook and waited. Days passed with no word. A week. Lucas was nearly mad with worry when finally a message arrived. It was not from Karthira but from Dravik. The note was brief. Come to the tower. Urgent. Lucas grabbed his pack and left immediately, not even bothering to close the shop. He made the journey north in record time, arriving at the tower in late afternoon. Dravik was waiting outside. What has happened? Where is Karthira? She is here. Inside. Lucas, you should know things went badly with our father. Lucas's heart sank. How badly? See for yourself. Lucas rushed into the tower and found Karthira sitting by the fire. She looked up as he entered, and he saw that her face was bruised, one eye swollen nearly shut. Karthira. He was at her side in an instant, gently examining the injuries. It looks worse than it is, she said, but her voice was strained. My father was displeased. He struck you. After I told him I would not marry Lord Cragger, after I told him I questioned many of our traditions and intended to forge my own path. After I told him, she paused, that I had feelings for a human. Lucas felt the blood drain from his face. You told him about us, not specifically. I did not name you, but I told him I had come to respect humans through my own observations, that I believed our peoples could coexist peacefully. He called me a traitor, we argued. He struck me. She touched her bruised face gingerly. Then he declared me clanless, just as he did Dravik. I was given an hour to leave the manor. I came here. Dravik knelt beside his sister. We are both outcasts now, at least we have each other. Lucas looked at the two of them, these noble orc siblings, cast out by their own father for daring to show compassion and follow their hearts. Fury burned in him, followed immediately by determination. Come to Millbrook, he said. Both of you. My home is not large, but we will manage. You can stay with me until we find proper arrangements. Lucas, we cannot ask that of you, Karthira protested. Bringing 2 orcs into your village, I am not asking permission. I am telling you what will happen. You helped Dravik when he was alone. Now I am helping both of you. He stood and began gathering their few possessions. We leave tomorrow morning. It is too late to travel today, but at first light we go. That night, the 3 of them sat around the fire in the tower making plans. It would not be easy. The village might react badly. There would be gossip, possibly hostility. But Lucas was known in Millbrook, respected, and he was prepared to spend whatever social capital he had built up to secure a place for the 2 people he cared most about. Karthira reached for his hand in the darkness, and he held it tightly. They had chosen a difficult path, all 3 of them. But it was their path, chosen freely rather than dictated by tradition or fear. They set out at dawn. The journey south was long, slowed by the need to travel carefully and avoid main roads where they might be recognized. Lucas had wrapped Karthira's and Dravik's lower faces in scarves, ostensibly to protect against the cold but really to obscure their features. If they encountered anyone, he wanted them to pass as simply travelers rather than outcast orc nobility. They reached Millbrook 3 days later, arriving at dusk. Lucas led them through the back streets to his shop. His neighbor Martha was sweeping her front step and stopped dead when she saw the trio. Lucas. Who are? She spotted Karthira's green skin beneath her hood, and her eyes went wide. Are those, Martha? Please come inside. I need to explain something, and I need your help. To her credit, Martha followed them into the shop without screaming, though her hand shook as she gripped her broom like a weapon. Once inside, with the curtains drawn, Lucas introduced Karthira and Dravik properly. "These are my friends. They have been cast out by their clan for refusing to follow traditions they found cruel. They have nowhere else to go. I am asking you to trust me, they mean no harm. They simply need shelter and a chance to start over." Martha stared at the two orcs, then at Lucas. "Have you lost your mind? When people find out you are harboring orcs, then help me explain. You have known me for 10 years, Martha. Have I ever lied to you? Have I ever been anything but honest and kind?" "No," she admitted reluctantly. "These people are the same. Give them a chance to prove it." It took another hour of conversation, but finally Martha agreed not to raise an alarm immediately. She could not promise that others would be so understanding. "You will need to speak to Alderman Wright," she said finally. "If you are going to have orcs living here, he needs to know. Better he hear it from you than from gossip." Lucas agreed. The next morning, leaving Karthira and Dravik hidden in his apartment, he went to see Alderman Wright, the village's informal leader. Wright was a pragmatic man in his 60s who had led Millbrook through hard times and good. He listened to Lucas's story with growing incredulity. "Let me understand this correctly. You have been secretly traveling to help an outcast orc. You fell in love with his sister, who happens to be orc nobility, and now both of them are living in your apartment above the tailor shop." "That is the essence of it, yes, sir." Wright rubbed his face. "Lucas, you are asking me to accept 2 orcs into our village. Orcs, the same creatures who raided our lands 20 years ago, whose warriors killed my brother." Lucas felt his hopes sinking, but Wright held up a hand. "However, you are one of the most respected tradesmen in this village. You have never given me reason to doubt your judgment." And he sighed. "I am old enough to know that the world is changing. We cannot live in the past forever." He fixed Lucas with a stern look. "I will allow them to stay provisionally, but they must prove themselves. They must work, contribute to the village, show that they are not a threat, and if there is any trouble, any at all, they must leave. Are we clear?" "Perfectly clear, sir, thank you." "Do not thank me yet. This is going to cause an uproar when people find out." Wright was right. Over the next few days, as word spread that Lucas was housing 2 orcs, reactions ranged from curiosity to outright hostility. Some people refused to come to his shop. Others made a point of walking past and glaring at the windows. But Karthira and Dravik were determined to prove their worth. Dravik, with his hunting skills, began providing game to the village butcher, refusing payment but accepting small amounts of credit that he could use for supplies. Karthira, drawing on her education, offered to teach reading and writing to children whose parents could not afford a tutor. Slowly, grudgingly, attitudes began to shift. The butcher admitted that Dravik's hunting skills were exceptional and that he brought in high-quality game. Parents found that Karthira was patient and skilled as a teacher, and their children actually looked forward to lessons. When a late winter storm damaged several homes, Dravik and Karthira worked alongside human villagers to make repairs, their strength and stamina proving invaluable. Lucas watched with pride as the 2 orcs integrated themselves into village life. It was not smooth. There were still those who muttered about monsters and dangers, but the hostility was fading. Meanwhile, Lucas and Karthira navigated their relationship carefully. They could not be openly affectionate without causing scandal, but they found small moments together. Evening walks on the outskirts of the village, quiet conversations in his workshop after hours, stolen kisses when no one was watching. "I never imagined my life would look like this," Karthira said one evening as they walked along the river. It was early spring now, the ice breaking up and flowing downstream. Teaching human children to raid, living in a small apartment, being with you. "Do you regret it?" "Not for a moment." She took his hand. "I am happier now than I ever was as Lady Thornheart." That life was a cage, even if it was gilded. This, she gestured at the village, the river, the world around them, this is freedom. As spring turned to summer, life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Lucas's shop remained busy. Dravik took on work as a huntsman and guide, his knowledge of the wilderness proving valuable to merchants traveling through the region. Karthira continued teaching and also began helping with accounts for some of the village businesses, her education making her valuable. One warm evening in late summer, Lucas asked Karthira to walk with him to a hill overlooking the village. They sat on the grass watching the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Karthira, I have been thinking about our future," Lucas said. She looked at him, waiting. "When you first came to Millbrook, you had just lost everything, your title, your family, your place in the world. I did not want to pressure you to ask for more when you were still finding your footing." He took her hand. "But months have passed. You have built a new life here. And I need to know, is this what you want? Is this enough for you? Being here with you is more than enough," she said softly. "Lucas, you gave me something I never thought I would have, the chance to choose my own path, the chance to be loved for who I am, not what I represent." "Then marry me," Lucas said. The words came out in a rush. "I know it will not be easy, I know people will talk, that some will never accept it, but I love you. I want to build a life with you, openly and honestly. Will you be my wife?" Karthira's eyes shimmered with tears. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." They held each other as the last light faded from the sky, making plans for their future. The wedding would have to be small and private. Alderman Wright would likely perform the ceremony, as he was authorized to oversee civil marriages. Not everyone in the village would approve, but enough people had come to accept Karthira that they would have support. When they returned to the shop, they found Dravik waiting with news of his own. "I have been offered a position," he said, unable to hide his excitement. "The merchant Hadrian, the one I have been guiding on his routes north, he wants to hire me permanently. Not just as a guide, but as a partner. He wants to expand his trade into Orc territories, and he thinks I could serve as an intermediary, someone who understands both cultures." "That is wonderful," Karthira embraced her brother. "It means I would be traveling frequently, but I would have steady income, purpose. And perhaps," Dravik's voice grew thoughtful, "perhaps I could help build bridges between our peoples, as you hope to do." "You will be doing what I could not," Karthira said. "Dravik, I am so proud of you." The three of them celebrated that night, drinking wine and talking late into the evening. They had all found their way to new lives, different from what they had been raised to expect, but infinitely more meaningful. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in Alderman Wright's house, with only a handful of witnesses present. Martha was there, having become a surprising ally to the couple. The butcher came, as did several parents whose children Karthira taught. Dravik stood beside his sister, beaming with pride. Lucas wore his finest suit, altered by his own hands to fit perfectly. Karthira wore a simple dress of forest green that complemented her skin, her hair braided with white flowers. When Alderman Wright asked them to speak their vows, Lucas felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Karthira, when you first summoned me to your manor, I never imagined where that journey would lead. You have taught me courage, shown me that love can bridge any divide. I promise to stand beside you, to honor you, to build a life with you that is worthy of the sacrifices you have made." Karthira's voice was steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Lucas, you saw me when I was still pretending to be someone I was not, and you helped me find the courage to become who I truly am. You risked everything to help my brother, and then you risked even more to help me. I promise to love you, to cherish you, to walk this path together wherever it may lead." Alderman Wright pronounced them married, and Lucas kissed his wife for the first time as her husband. The small gathering applauded, and even Martha dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful. They shared a meal, drank toasts, and Lucas found himself surrounded by people who, against all odds, had come to accept this unlikely union. It was not perfect acceptance. He knew there were still villagers who disapproved, but it was enough. That night, alone in Lucas's apartment, which was now truly their home, Karthira and Lucas lay in bed talking about the future. "I have been thinking about what Dravik said," Karthira murmured, her head resting on Lucas's chest. "About building bridges between our peoples. Perhaps there is still work I can do in that regard." "What do you mean?" "I may not be Lady Thornheart anymore, but I still have knowledge of Orc culture, politics, customs. I could write about it, help humans understand Orcs better. Perhaps even travel with Dravik sometimes, facilitating trade negotiations. That sounds like it could be important work. And perhaps," her voice grew quieter, "perhaps someday, if enough bridges are built, my father will see that he was wrong. That strength can take many forms, and that compassion is not weakness." Lucas held her closer. "Even if he never does, you have built a good life. You have purpose, people who care about you, the freedom to make your own choices." "I have you," she said simply. "That is more than I ever dared hope for." The months that followed were among the happiest of Lucas's life. He and Karthira settled into married life with surprising ease. She proved to be an excellent manager of household finances, and often helped him with his tailoring business, handling accounts, and dealing with customers who were becoming increasingly comfortable with her presence. Dravik's work flourished. His trade routes expanded, and he became known as a reliable intermediary between human and Orc merchants. He visited Millbrook regularly, always staying with Lucas and Karthira, and they treasured these reunions. One evening, nearly a year after the wedding, Dravik arrived with unexpected news. "I have been in contact with someone from our clan," he said carefully. "Not father, but one of the elders. Elder Mirza, do you remember her? Karthira." Karthira nodded slowly. "She always had a more progressive outlook than most. She has been watching what we have accomplished. The trade I have facilitated, the peace you have helped build here in Millbrook. She thinks," Dravik paused, choosing his words carefully, "she thinks that perhaps our exile has served a purpose, that we are proving it is possible for Orcs and humans to coexist peacefully." "What does this mean?" Lucas asked. "It means that when Father eventually dies or steps down, there may be a chance for us to return. Not to reclaim our positions, those are lost, but to be welcomed back into the clan. To no longer be clanless." Karthira sat very still. "And if we do not want to return, then we stay here, and that is fine too. But Mirza wanted you to know that the option might exist someday, that not everyone in our clan believes Father was right to cast us out." That night, after Dravik had gone to sleep in the guest room they had set up for him, Lucas and Karthira talked about what this might mean. "Do you want to return?" Lucas asked. "If the opportunity arose." "I do not know," Karthira admitted. "Part of me misses my home, my people. But I have built a new home here with you. I have found happiness I never knew was possible. Would returning to Orc society, even as a welcomed member rather than nobility, would that mean giving this up? Not necessarily. We could divide our time perhaps. Serve as bridges ourselves, living in both worlds. That could work." She smiled at him. "Look at us, planning futures we never could have imagined 2 years ago. The Orc Noblewoman and the human Tailor, it sounds like a fairy tale. The best ones always do." The seasons turned. Another year passed, then another. Lucas and Karthira's life in Millbrook became solidly established. Their strange beginning was now simply part of the village's history, the tailor who had married an Orc noblewoman. Children who had been suspicious at first grew up thinking nothing of seeing Karthira teaching lessons or working in the market. A few other orcs, hearing of the acceptance they had found, came to settle in the region, and slowly, steadily, the barrier between the peoples began to erode. Dravik's trade network expanded to include multiple orc clans and human settlements. He became wealthy and respected, though he remained humble, always crediting his sister and Lucas with giving him hope when he had none. Then, 3 years after their marriage, word came that Lord Thornheart had died. The message arrived via one of Dravik's merchant contacts. Their father had passed suddenly from a heart ailment. The clan was in turmoil, with various factions vying for leadership. Elder Mirza had sent word specifically to Karthira and Dravik. The clan needed them. "I do not understand," Karthira said, reading the letter for the 3rd time. "We are clanless. How can they need us?" "Because times are changing," Dravik said. Mirza writes that many of the younger generation have been watching what we have built. They see the prosperity that comes from trade with humans, the strength that comes from cooperation rather than isolation. They want to move in a new direction, but the old guard resists. They need someone who bridges both worlds. "They need you," Lucas said to his wife. "You were raised for leadership. You understand both orc and human cultures now. You could guide the clan into this new era." Karthira looked torn. "But that would mean leaving Millbrook, leaving you." "Not leaving necessarily. As we discussed before, we could bridge both worlds together. You would come with me, to live among orcs." Lucas took her hands. "Karthira, I have spent 3 years learning your language, your customs. I have listened to every story Dravik has told about your people. I know I will never be truly orc, but I can at least be someone who understands and respects your culture. If you feel called to return and help your clan, I will support you. We go together or not at all." She kissed him, fierce and grateful. "I do not deserve you. You deserve everything good in this world." They prepared for the journey north, to Thornheart Manor and the clan Karthira had left behind. Lucas arranged for a trusted apprentice to mind the shop. Martha, who had become a good friend, promised to keep an eye on their home. Dravik would travel with them, serving as escort and advisor. The journey took a week. As they approached the familiar grounds of Thornheart Manor, Karthira grew increasingly tense. "What if they reject us again? What if this is a trap?" "Then we leave and return to Millbrook," Lucas said calmly. "But I do not think it is. Mirza has been corresponding with Dravik for over a year. She is trustworthy." They were met at the gates by Elder Mirza herself, a formidable orc woman with gray streaking her black hair and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. She embraced Karthira firmly. "Welcome home, child, though I suppose you are no longer a child." She turned to Lucas and studied him with open curiosity. "So you are the human who stole Our Lady's heart. I approve. Anyone who can inspire such devotion must have worth." Lucas bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Elder." Mirza led them into the manor, which looked much as Lucas remembered from that midnight summons years ago, yet somehow different. There were more people, and the atmosphere was charged with tension. They were brought to the great hall where the clan elders had assembled. What followed was hours of discussion, sometimes heated. Some elders opposed Karthira's return, arguing that she had been rightfully exiled and should remain so. Others pointed to the success of her brother's trade ventures, to the peace she had helped build in Millbrook, to the respect she had earned from humans. Finally, Elder Mirza stood and commanded silence. "We are at a crossroads," she declared. "We can cling to the old ways and watch our clan wither, or we can adapt. Lord Thornheart's death leaves us without clear leadership. His son Dravik was cast out. His daughter Karthira was cast out. By tradition, Leadership should pass to the next eldest, Lord Thornheart's brother, who is even more traditional than his brother was. Is that what we want? Murmurs of dissent rippled through the assembly. I propose a different path, Mirza continued. I propose we ask Karthira Thornheart, yes, Thornheart, for blood does not change to return and take leadership of this clan. Not as it was, but as it must become. She has proven she can bridge the divide between our peoples. She has shown strength of conscience. These are the qualities we need. The debate that followed was fierce. But slowly, particularly among the younger clan members, support for Karthira grew. When the vote was finally called, it was not unanimous, but it was clear. Karthira was invited to return and assume leadership of House Thornheart. She stood before the assembly, Lucas at her side, and spoke. I thank you for this trust, but I must be clear about what I will do if I accept this position. I will not reinstate the right of proving as it exists. I will not require killing to prove worth. I will actively pursue trade and cooperation with human settlements. I will judge clan members by their actions and character, not by their adherence to traditions that no longer serve us. She paused. And I will remain married to Lucas Vance, a human. If you cannot accept these terms, then I respectfully decline. There was stunned silence. Then, unexpectedly, one of the younger warriors stood and spoke. I say we accept. My father died in a pointless border skirmish with humans 3 years ago. Had we been trading partners instead of enemies, he would still live. I support Lady Karthira's vision. Others rose to speak in support. Not all, but enough. When the final vote was taken, Karthira's terms were accepted. That night, lying in the chambers that had once been hers as a girl, now shared with her husband, Karthira wept. These are not sad tears, she told Lucas when he held her. I am overwhelmed. I never thought I would return here, much less as leader. And that they accepted you, accepted our marriage, it is because they see your strength. They see what you have built and what you can do for them. We, Lucas, what we can do, this is not something I can accomplish alone. Lucas kissed her forehead. Then we do it together. The months that followed were challenging. Karthira worked tirelessly to reshape clan traditions, meeting resistance from the old guard but finding support among the younger generation. She established formal trade agreements with Millbrook and other human settlements. She created new rites of passage that tested courage and wisdom without requiring killing. She appointed Dravik as the clan's trade master, and he excelled in the role. Lucas found his own place in this new world. He was not Orc and never would be, but he was Karthira's husband and consort, and that gave him a certain status. He used it to facilitate communication between nervous human traders and skeptical orcs, often serving as translator and mediator. He also taught some of the orc youth about human culture, just as Karthira had taught human children about reading and writing. 2 years after returning to Thornheart Manor, Karthira stood before the clan assembly to give her annual report. Lucas watched from his seat of honor as she detailed the increased prosperity from trade, the reduction in border conflicts, the growing acceptance between their peoples. When my father cast out my brother and later myself, he believed he was protecting clan traditions and strength, she said. But true strength is not rigidity. It is the ability to adapt, to grow, to change when change is necessary. We honor our ancestors not by blindly following every tradition, but by ensuring our clan thrives and flourishes. The assembly erupted in approval. Even the most traditional elders had to admit that, under Karthira's leadership, House Thornheart had grown wealthier and more secure than it had been in generations. That evening, Karthira and Lucas walked the manor grounds together, something they did most nights when weather permitted. The gardens had been tended and expanded, now including both traditional orc plants and human varieties, symbolic of the blending cultures. "You ever miss your simple life?" Karthira asked. "The tailor shop in Millbrook, the quiet days?" "Sometimes," Lucas admitted. "But I would not trade what we have built here. Look at what you have accomplished, Karthira. You have changed an entire culture's trajectory. You have brought peace where there was conflict. Children growing up now, both orc and human, will live in a world with less hatred and fear." "We have done this," she corrected. "You stood beside me every step, even when it was difficult, even when you were the only human in a clan of orcs. Your courage inspires me daily." They stopped at a spot overlooking the valley, where lights from both orc homesteads and human villages dotted the landscape. Once, these two peoples had viewed each other across this valley with suspicion and hostility. Now they traded, talked, and occasionally intermarried. It was not perfect. Prejudice still existed on both sides, but it was progress. "You remember what you asked me to mend, that first night you summoned me?" Lucas said with a smile. Karthira laughed. "I asked you to mend what was broken, and you did, though not in the way either of us expected. You broke free from a tradition that would have destroyed your spirit. Dravik found purpose after losing everything. And I," Lucas pulled her close, "I found love with the most extraordinary woman I have ever known." "The Orc Noblewoman and the Tailor," Karthira said, echoing his words from years before. "It does sound like a fairy tale. All the best stories are true ones, lived by people brave enough to write their own endings." They stood together as the sun set, two people from different worlds who had found a way to bridge the divide between them. Behind them, the manor that was now their home stood strong. Below them, the valley they had helped bring peace to stretched into the distance. And before them, the future uncertain perhaps, but theirs to shape together. In the years that followed, their story would become legend. The Orc Noblewoman who gave up everything for love and honor. The human tailor who showed compassion to outcasts and courage in the face of prejudice. The brother who refused to kill and instead built trade routes. Together, they had changed the world, one small choice at a time. Karthira eventually bore two children, a daughter and a son, who grew up fluent in both Orcish and human languages, comfortable in both cultures. They would become the first generation of a new kind of leader, one that saw no contradiction in being both orc and friend to humans. Dravik married eventually, choosing a human woman he met through his trade routes, and their union was celebrated by both peoples. His children played with Karthira's, and all of them learned from an early age that love recognized no boundaries of species or culture. Millbrook remained important to them, and they visited often. Lucas's shop was maintained by his apprentice, but occasionally Lucas would spend a month there, working with his hands again, remembering where it all began. The villagers had long since accepted Karthira as one of their own, and children who had been toddlers when she first arrived now brought their own children to meet Lady Karthira, who married the tailor. Elder Mirza lived to see the full flowering of the changes she had supported, watching with satisfaction as House Thornheart became a model for other orc clans. Before she died, she told Karthira, "You proved that the strongest steel is forged through adversity, then tempered with love. Your father saw only one path to strength. You saw many." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas and Karthira returned to the tower where Dravik had once lived as an exile. It had been converted into a way station now, a place where travelers, orc and human alike, could find shelter. A plaque had been mounted near the door, reading, "Here began the friendship that bridged two worlds." They climbed to the top of the restored tower and looked out over the land. So much had changed in 10 years. Border conflicts had virtually ceased. Mixed settlements were becoming common. The fear and hatred that had defined relations between their peoples was giving way to curiosity and cooperation. "That first night when you came here with my message," Karthira said, "did you ever imagine we would end up here?" "Not in my wildest dreams," Lucas admitted. "I thought I was doing a simple errand for an eccentric noblewoman. I never imagined I was beginning the greatest adventure of my life. You saved my brother's life, you know. If you had not come when you did, if you had not kept returning, he would not have survived that winter. His hope was failing. And you saved mine in a different way. Before I met you, I was content but not truly happy. I went through the motions of life without really living. You showed me what it meant to love fully, to take risks for something bigger than myself, to believe that impossible things can become possible." They held each other as the sun moved across the sky, marking time not in hours but in heartbeats shared, in breath synchronized, in the comfortable silence of two souls perfectly attuned. "What she asked me to mend was not clothing," Lucas said softly. "It was broken bonds. Between brother and sister, between peoples, between tradition and progress, and somehow in mending all of that we found each other." "The best tailoring always is," Karthira replied with a smile. "Finding what is torn and making it whole, finding what is separate and joining it together. Creating something beautiful from disparate pieces." They descended from the tower as evening approached, hand in hand, ready to return to their home, their family, their life. Behind them, the tower stood as a monument to where it all began. Before them, the road stretched toward a future they had helped build, one stitch at a time. In Thornheart Manor, their children waited. In Millbrook, friends and neighbors went about their peaceful lives. In the valley and beyond, orcs and humans lived side by side, no longer enemies but neighbors, traders, sometimes friends, occasionally lovers. The world had not been transformed overnight, but slowly, steadily, one connection at a time. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth: that courage could take many forms, that love could bridge any divide, and that sometimes the most powerful magic was simply choosing compassion over tradition, understanding over fear, and hope over despair. The Orc Noblewoman had summoned the tailor at midnight to mend what was broken. Together, they had mended far more than either could have imagined. They had mended a family torn apart by rigid tradition. They had mended the divide between two peoples who had seen each other as enemies. They had mended their own lonely hearts, finding in each other something precious and rare. And in the end, they had proven that the strongest fabric is woven not from a single thread, no matter how fine, but from many threads together, different colors, different textures, but all contributing to a pattern more beautiful than any could create alone. Their story was not just about them anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed that a better world was possible, that prejudice could be overcome, that love could conquer fear. It belonged to the children growing up in a world less divided than the one their parents had known. It belonged to anyone who had ever felt cast out, broken, or alone, and dared to believe they could be whole again. Lucas Vance and Karthira Thornheart lived long lives, growing old together with the kind of contentment that comes from living according to one's own values. They faced challenges. Certainly old prejudices die hard, and there were always those who opposed their vision of a united future. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. When historians later wrote about the period of peace and cooperation between orcs and humans, they pointed to many factors: changing economic conditions, shifting political realities, demographic trends. But those who really knew, who had lived through those transformative years, knew the truth. It began with one orc noblewoman brave enough to question tradition, One human tailor willing to show compassion to an outcast, and one exiled brother whose refusal to kill sparked everything that followed. It began with what was broken and the determination to make it whole. It began at midnight with an unexpected summons, and it became a love story that changed the world. Their grandchildren would eventually ask them to tell the story, and they would sit together still holding hands after decades of marriage and begin. It started with a knock on the door at midnight, and the children would listen wide-eyed, never tiring of hearing how their grandmother had been a great lady who gave up everything for what she believed in, how their grandfather had been a simple tailor who proved that ordinary people could do extraordinary things, and how together they had shown that love was stronger than fear, hope more powerful than hatred, and that the most important thing anyone could do was have the courage to be kind, especially when it was difficult. This was the legacy they left behind, not just the trade agreements and peace treaties, not just the reformed traditions and prosperous clans, but the simple, profound truth that every person, regardless of what they looked like or where they came from, deserved to be seen, valued, and loved. And in a small tailor shop in Millbrook, preserved carefully, hung the very first piece Lucas had sewn after meeting Karthira, a simple handkerchief embroidered with two symbols intertwined, the crest of House Thornheart and a needle and thread. A reminder that the greatest acts of creation often begin with the smallest stitches, but with patience, skill, and love, they can become something magnificent. The Orc Noblewoman and the Tailor, the brother who refused to kill, the village that learned to accept, the clan that learned to change. All of them together, mending what was broken and weaving something new. Their story had a fairy tale quality to it, people said. But it was real. It happened. And it proved that sometimes, against all odds, love really does conquer all.